the Mamba or the Third Lance? That's the question we're going to be answering today by putting the two ships head to head and deep diving into the stats. The D2E merch store is open. There are t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, mugs and tote bags with many cool designs. Head down to the link in the video description and get yourself your merchandise today. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Elite Dangerous with Downtoearth Astronomy. So the Mamba and the Third Lance, same but different, right? Well, there are minute differences between the two ships and we're going to look at them today, so you hopefully can determine which of the two ships suit your purpose the best. First of all, let's have a look at the price. Well, Third Lance comes in at 51 million credit and the Mamba at 55. So again, prices are almost identical, with the Mamba being slightly more expensive. So let's have a look and let's see if the Mamba is worth the extra price. First of all, let's look at the core internals. Well, they are actually exactly identical. I listed them here in the order that they are shown in the outfitting screen, meaning they both have a Class 6 power plant. They have a Class 5 thrusters, Class 4 frameshift drive and life support, Class 6 power distributor, and a Class 4 sensor. So exactly the same here. However, when we move over to the optional internals, we begin to see a little bit of a difference. They both have a single Class 5 Class 5 optional internal, and then they have a Class 4. And this is when the main difference between the optional comes. Well, the Third Lance has two Class 4s and the Mamba has only one, whereas it has a Class 3 that doesn't come on the Third Lance. So basically, if we look at it, what you do in the Third Lance compared to the Mamba is on the Mamba you lose a Class 4, move that down to a Class 3, and instead you upgrade one of the Class 1 slots to a Class 2 slot. So for this, I would definitely say this is a win for the Third Lance. I would much rather have those two Class 4 slots. The hardpoints is also slightly different. They both have a single huge, and of course the Third Lance has its characteristics for medium hardpoints, whereas the Mamba has two large and two smalls. Now, overall, I think if you look at that raw damage output, the Mamba might actually have a slight edge over the Third Lance, but this is really so close that I think this is pretty much just up to your personal preference, which of the two weapon loadouts you prefer the most. Do you like to have tons of mediums? Do you like to have a few small and some large? It really depends on what weapons you're planning to fit on the ship. More things that are similar, they both have 6 utility slots. They both have the exact same hull mass of 250 tons. This means that their jump range is also going to be exactly the same. The jump range I've listed here is if you strip it down everything out of the ship, you derate everything apart from the frameshift drive, which you put an A-rate on, and then you put a long-range mass manager engineering on it, then that's the jump range I've put on. So it's kind of like similar with no modules fitted or anything. So this is not a realistic jump range that you probably can't get out of it unless you're going to begin fitting guiding modules. This is just for a comparison's sake. But because they have the same size FSD drive and they have the same hull mass and pretty much the same optional internals, they're going to have very comparable jump ranges as well. And finally, the crew members, more similar stats here. They both have the option of fitting 2 crew members on the bridge of the ship. So overall, just looking at the core stats of the ship, I would say it's a slight win to the Third Lance with having slightly better optional internals and is a little bit cheaper, which is really the only stats where they really differ from each other. But let's move on and let's look at defense. First, we're going to have a look at the base shield strength. This is the shield strength that is being used to calculate the final shield hit points. This means this is before we take any like shield generators or shield boosters into consideration. This is the stat that is being modified by the shield generators and the shield boosters by those percent factors. I have more videos on that if you're more interested in deep diving into the mechanics behind shields. Here we can see that the Third Lance comes in with 300 megajoules of base shield, where the Mamba comes in at 270, meaning that if you fit the same size shield generator and the same number of shield boosters and you engineer them exactly the same, they will come out with the Mamba having about 10% less shield hit points than the Third Lance. So here again, a slight win to the Third Lance. Moving on to the armor, they both have an armor hardness of 70, which is, to be honest, pretty good for the size of the ship. They have really strong armor. The armor hardness is not necessarily, it's not like resistance, it just tells you how big weapons they can kind of work towards, work against, I should say. It's basically the opposite side of the armor piercing. So if you have like an armor piercing weapon that has armor piercing 70 and you're shooting at armor hardness 70, well, you get no bonuses or you get no penalties. But then as those stats change, you will either begin to get a bonus or a penalty. But 70 is pretty good, so pretty strong armor. If we move on to the base armor hit points, it's the same as with shield. This is the hit points that will then be modified by other modules. Here there's a slight win to the Mamba, but it is a really small win. The third lance coming in at 225 base armor hit points, with the Mamba coming in 230. So this is just a few percent, like 2 point something increase in armor hit points to the Mamba over the third lance. So a very small win there. Finally, heat capacity. This is again the stat that determines how much, when your power plant and your weapons that generate heat, this is how much heat the ship can handle before it begins to overheat. And here we can see the third lance having a very significant advantage over the Mamba. Both the third lance and the Mamba are ships that are running really hot. They are not very heat efficient ship. They have a really small heat capacity. They overheat easily. But that 165 heat capacity on the Mamba is really not that good, and well, it's gonna overheat very easily. Next up, let's have a look at speed and maneuverability. The third lance is coming in here with a base speed of 260 meters a second and a boost speed of 350. The Mamba is significantly faster, I would say, at 310 meters a second base speed and 380 meters a second boost speed. Remember, once again, this is base speeds. Because the ship fits the same size thrusters and has the same hull mass, and it's almost identical when it comes to the optional internals and weapon loadout, we can just have a look at the speed. Normally, if you have to compare ships, they had different hull masses and they fitted different sizes of thrusters. We would have to actually go in game and do some tests in there to kind of give a feeling for which is better. But because the two ships are so similar, they have the same mass, same size thrusters, we can just look at the base stats and we can definitely see here that the Mamba is going to be the faster of the two ships. However, when we begin to look at the maneuverability side of it, here we can see the third lance starting out with a roll speed, base roll speed I should say, again can be modified with engineering, yada, but a base roll speed of 90 degrees a second, where the Mamba only has 80, so it doesn't roll as fast. And it's pretty much the same story. We begin to look at both pitch and yaw, with the third lance in general being more maneuverable than the Mamba. So overall, in the speed and maneuverability department, well, if you want something that's fast in a straight line, then the Mamba is the ship for you. However, if you prefer to have a little bit more maneuverability, then I would think that the third lance is probably the choice. So which one should you pick? Well, I personally prefer the third lance over the Mamba. The weapon loadout on the two ships is really just a matter of choice. I see those as pretty equal. But the better shield and the fact that it is more maneuverable, which will, in a combat situation, which to be honest is most likely what you're going to be using it for, I would rather have that little bit extra maneuverability over the extra straight line speed that you get at the Mamba. So overall, I think personally that the third lance is the better choice, at least looking at it from a combat context. If you're building a race ship, well then obviously the Mamba would be a better choice. Finally, if you have other ships that you want me to try and compare and pitch against each other, let me know in the comment section and I might consider it. Also, if you want to, I would be really happy if you would consider supporting the channel on Patreon. All money raised through Patreon goes directly back to buying equipment and lights and cameras, microphones, that's the kind of stuff that helped me make more, better sounding, better looking videos for you guys. Thanks a lot for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go down and subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and until next time, I will see you guys in space.